Other than it being a very rainy week, I got pretty upset this week for some things I read in the newspaper. As you know, about a month ago, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, issued a document, a very long document on family life. And I have not read it yet because I haven't got a copy of it, but I've been reading bits and pieces of it in the press. And it's really beautiful. We all have to read it, because it doesn't have just to do with family life, but family life in the Christian community, the family of Christ, if you will. But then this week, I've begun to read little bits and pieces from people who are what we might call naysayers. There's an auxiliary bishop who is on a real roll, just denouncing practically everything the Pope said. And there's even a cardinal in Rome who's doing it a little bit more sneakily, but he's saying the same things, you know. And I got really upset by this because it really seems to be the family of Christ not working together. And then I picked up the readings for this Sunday and I was reminded that it's always been like this in the church. We've never gotten along from the get-go in everything. And that episode, which may have been seen very strange to you, was very important for the early church. You remember 50 years ago we had a council, a Vatican Council, which was the gathering of all the leadership of the church, and a lot of changes were made. In fact, the Pope who started the council said he was opening the church's windows to let some fresh air in. Oh, in the last 50 years there's been a lot of closing of windows, I think. And now this Pope's come along and opened the windows and there's a bit of a hurricane coming through, which I think is wonderful. But the early church had the same problems. It was a Jewish community. They did Jewish things. They went to the temple every day to pray, just like they did before they were followers of Christ. They kept the same dietary laws that they kept before Jesus came along. But then the church went out into the wider world, as Jesus said it should, and they were still imposing all these Jewish things, which made sense to the Jewish people, on the Romans and the Egyptians and the Libyans and all the people who became followers of Christ. And so they got together in Jerusalem, which was really, I guess, the first council, and they said, you know, we can't impose all these things from our background on people who don't have the same background. The basic thing is you put your trust and your belief in Jesus of Nazareth and turn your life over to him by going through baptism. They kept a few of the ritual things because they just couldn't give them up, and they make sense to Jews, but eventually they all died out as well, all those practices which the early, very early Christians, the Jewish Christians, practiced. And I think we're in a time now when the church has been in a sort of a circle the wagon mode for about 500 years, basically since the Reformation. And the spirit, the same spirit that was active in this council, notice they say, it has seemed good to us and to the Spirit of Jesus that we say these things, releasing you from all these obligations. And the same activity is going on in the church now. Jesus said, I will send you the Spirit, and the Spirit will lead you into all truth. He didn't say the Spirit's going to give us all truth in a book or in a set of beliefs. I will lead you into all truth. It's a process, and we are still in that process, the same as the Jewish Christians in Jerusalem were in that process in the very beginning. The Spirit is guiding the Christian community, and basically what it's teaching us to do is to love as Jesus commanded us. I give you a new commandment. Love each other the way I love you. That's the bottom line. And Augustine said it very well in the 4th century. He said, love, and then do what you want. Because if you love, you will always be doing the right thing, the Christ thing, the God thing. And we're in a period now of transition where I think the Spirit is waking the Christian community up that we perhaps have to do things in a different way. You can't expect the Christians in Kenya to practice their faith in exactly the same way as we do in Beaumont or New York. And we've done that for centuries. We've imposed our cultural ways of doing things upon new Christians. And it has driven some people away from Christ and not brought them towards Christ. So I shouldn't really be upset, and I'm glad we had this reading today that reminded me that the Spirit is guiding our community. The Spirit of Jesus is in charge of the church. And all we are required to do is to listen to the voice of the Spirit in our own lives, in our family lives, in the life of our parish or diocese or monastery. Maybe it'll even spill over into our political life. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But the Spirit is guiding the disciples of Jesus. Because if it wasn't for the Spirit of Jesus, we would have disappeared centuries ago. But as long as we listen to Christ, will we make mistakes? Yes, the Pope has said as much. He says, I'd rather have a dirty church that makes mistakes than an immaculate church that doesn't do anything, so it can't make any mistakes. And that's what he's trying to wake us up to, using our brain, using the inspiration of the Spirit, which is guaranteed, even more so than our thinking, in order to do the will of God in Christ, which is really to show God's loving face to the world by the way we live. Remember, the people who came to Christ in the early centuries, and this is the quote of a pagan philosopher, did not come to Christ, become Christians, because of a set of beliefs. They said, look at those Christians, the way they love each other. That's what brought them into the church, not a doctrine or a catechism or anything like that. And that's the way it really has always been. That it's the love of Christ manifested in our lives and in our community that will bring people to Jesus.